Okay, we're going to move on to Standard 15. And let's jump right into this. Standard 15 has A, B, C, D has 4 substandards. And let's look at the stem of Standard 15. The student will analyze the origins and impact of United States involvement in World War I. Alright, so describe the movement. Standard 15A says describe the movement from U.S. neutrality to engagement in World War I. So here we have a change from the United States being neutral during World War I to be engaged in World War I. In other words, we're going to declare war and involve ourselves in this world war. Okay, so we're going to leave George Washington's neutrality and be in a war that involves the rest of the world. With reference, it says, with reference to unrestricted submarine warfare. In other words, that's going to be the answer to our question: what makes the United States move from neutrality to engagement in the war? Unrestricted submarine warfare is the answer. You need to know this for the EOCT. Alright, so our focus here is on unrestricted submarine warfare. It's going to be the thing that leads us from being neutral to be engaged in World War I. Let's look at it this way. World War I is going to last from 1914 to 1918. You don't have to know exact dates, but you do need to know from 1914 to 1918 we were in World War I. Oh, well, World War I was being fought, and it was in 1917 that the United States entered. So we have from 14 to 17 that we were neutral and not involved in the war. And then from 1917 to 1918 we were, the last year of the war. So you need to know this information for the EOCT. What caused World War I in 1914? You learn this in world history. It's not part of our standards here in U.S. history. It is in world history. We'll review real quick to kind of remind you. Imperialism, nationalism, militarism, and this complicated system of alliances are 4 of the major causes of World War I occurring in the world. So imperialism leads to international rivalries, particularly within Europe. And the United States entered this imperialism contest in 1900. We went overseas to Guam and the Philippines and Puerto Rico. You know, we just went over that in the last video. One of the last videos. Nationalism between and within country is going to intensify. And then there's going to be a military buildup in Europe. It's going to intensify, partly due to protect imperialistic properties and colonies. Alright, so and then these countries that are in Europe are going to create these complicated system of alliances. Alright, let's look at these European alliances. Russia had an agreement with France and Great Britain that if Germany attacked them, then Great Britain and France would help Russia. And then I think Russia even had an agreement with Germany that, you know, Great Britain and France. It was complicated. Serbia down here, some of these Balkan states had an agreement with Russia that if Germany attacked them, then they would attack Germany. But it was very complicated how all these alliances, secret alliances, were formed. So all we needed was a catalyst, something to happen somewhere in Europe that caused all these alliances to back one another and to be all of them be at war with one another. And that happened when the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were visiting Sarajevo. And Sarajevo is the capital of Bosnia. And here in Serbia, a Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip and his group, he assassinates both Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie as they rode in an open car. He shoots and kills both of them. And then Austria-Hungary is going to declare war on Serbia. Here's Austria-Hungary. Here's Sarajevo where they were assassinated. Austria-Hungary is going to declare war on Serbia. Now Russia is going to declare war on Austria-Serbia. Germany's going to declare war on Russia, and then Great Britain and France chime in, and we have this big melee of a world war happening. So this is what's going on with World War I, and they actually split up in Germany and Austria-Hungary and Turkey down here in Bulgaria create, since they run through the central of Europe, the Central Powers is what they were referred to as, the Central Powers during World War I. And the triple entente are the allied powers, where Italy, France, United States, Russia, Romania, all these other countries here. You can look at this key and figure that out. And this war is going to be marked by trench warfare. These trenches in here where these soldiers are going to line up along here, and a lot of them are going to die in those trenches. And in between those trenches is a place called no man's land, and a lot of army tanks and stuff like that were created so they can get across these areas. But anyway, during World War I, or before World War I, 1914, 1917, we were neutral. The United States was neutral. So our essential question is, what made us go from neutrality to be engaged in the war? So our essential question here is, what made the United States move from neutrality to engagement in World War I? This trench warfare put a lot of stress on Germany. This country here, Germany, put a lot of stress on Germany, and it was fighting a two-front war. France coming this way, United Kingdom this way, Russia this way, Romania up here. All right, so it had a lot of stress on it because it had a two-front war. And so as a result, Germany's going to start this policy known as unrestricted submarine warfare. And in the English Channel and in the British, or the Irish Sea over here, the British, around the British Isles, we see in this little lines that's shaded in here that Germany goes into this area and surrounds Great Britain and uses these submarines that were called Unterseeboots, or U-boats. Unterseeboot is a German, it means a submarine, pretty much. It's going to go out here in this area, and anytime a ship comes into this area that is not as anyway, this submarine is going to shoot a torpedo out at it and blow it up. Notice right here, Lusitania sunk May 7th, 1915. Lusitania. So in the Lusitania, this unrestricted submarine warfare is going to be what causes us to go into war. Here's the Lusitania here going into New York Harbor in the United States. Here it is docked in New York City. That's the Lusitania. It was a British luxury liner, and on it had a lot of British citizens, over 1,200 and something, almost 1,300, and there were about, I think, 100 and something Americans on board this luxury liner. And it heads back, going back to London and Great Britain. It's right here in near Ireland, Queenstown, Ireland, and it was sank by a German submarine with a torpedo, and it exploded. 1,200 people were killed, 128 Americans were on board. And this unrestricted submarine warfare is going to anger a lot of Americans. It's going to make a lot of Americans want to abandon isolationism or neutrality, want us to declare war on Germany during World War I. And here's a newspaper article from the New York Times showing, that it sank within 15 minutes. Some survivors made it clear, and on the coast of Ireland, made it there. But these submarines, without warning, blowing up these luxury liners, basically, people riding on them back and forth, and it's not really a war boat, meaning to cause any harm. But we see here that from 1914, 1918, Lusitania sinking is going to draw the United States into war in 1917, excuse me. Here's the western front of the war. Here's the eastern front. Here's where the Lusitania was sank. Another thing's going to happen, a Zimmerman note or Zimmerman telegram. Before we do that, Germany promised that it wouldn't sink any more ships after it sank a French ship called the Sussex. It gave the Sussex pledge, Germany did, said it wouldn't sink anymore, but more pressure accumulated, and Germany kind of went back on the Sussex pledge and said, and immediately started using unrestricted submarine warfare again and sank a lot more ships as a result. And so the Zimmerman note or the Zimmerman telegram was another reason. Arthur Zimmerman was the German foreign secretary, sent this telegram over wire to Mexico, and Great Britain intercepts the wire going from Germany to Mexico, and in it the ambassador, Arthur Zimmerman, proposed an alliance with Mexico, saying that if the United States joined the war, if Mexico would declare war against the United States, then at the end and conclusion of the war, when Germany had victory, that it would give Mexico a lot of the land it lost in the Mexican-American War. This is going to anger a lot of Americans, make them want to even more to declare war on Germany. And so this letter from Germany was sent down here to Mexico, promising to give back Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas to Mexico in the event Germany won. So President Wilson on February 3rd, 1917 asked Congress for a declaration of war. And in it, he insists that the world must be made safe for democracy. That's what he asked Congress. He said, we must make the world safe for democracy, and that there's an attack on democracy by Germany. Let's read some of this speech. Vessels of every kind, whatever their flag, their character, their cargo, their destination, their errand, have been ruthlessly sent to the bottom without warning and without thought of help or mercy for those on board. The vessels of friendly neutrals, along with those of belligerents, by the German government. And this is February 3rd, 1917, when he was asking for a declaration of war. So in this we see President Wilson speaks of unrestricted submarine warfare. So we can ask our question, what made the United States move from neutrality to asking Congress for a declaration of war and then being engaged in the war? Our answer to that is going to be unrestricted submarine warfare. In the language of the standards, this is what they want us to know for the test. This is extremely important. Further, in asking for a declaration of war, Woodrow Wilson says, neutrality is no longer feasible or desirable where the peace of the world is involved and the freedom of its peoples. It is a fearful thing to lead this great peaceful people into war, civilization itself seeming to be in the balance. And then he ends with, but the right is more precious than the peace, and we shall fight for the things which we have always carried nearest to our hearts, for democracy, for the rights and liberties of small nations, to bring peace and safety to all nations, and make the world itself at last free. So he's asking for, to fight this war, to protect democracy for the world, that it must be fought to make must be made safe for democracy. The world must have democracy as well. So in this we see Wilson's intentions with asking for war, and in this we see that he says neutrality is no longer feasible or desirable. And he speaks of this unrestricted submarine warfare here. So what made the United States leave neutrality to engagement in World War I? Unrestricted submarine warfare. And that was the objective of our standard. Describe the movement from U.S. neutrality to engagement in World War I with reference to unrestricted submarine warfare. Ask questions in class. Good luck on the quiz and test and the EOCT. Submarine warfare is going to be the thing that leads us from being neutral to be engaged in World War I. Let's look at it this way. World War I is going to last from 1914 to 1918. You don't have to know exact dates, but you do need to know from 1914 to 1918 we were in World War I. Oh, well, World War I was being fought, and it was in 1970. Okay, we're going to move on to Standard 15. And let's jump right into this. Standard 15 has A, B, C, D has 4 substandards. And let's look at the STEM of Standard 15. The student will analyze the origins and impact of United States involvement in World War I. Alright, so describe the team that the United States entered. So we have from 14 to 17 that we were neutral and not involved in the war. And then from 1917 to 1918 we were, the last year of the war. So you need to know this information for the EOCT. What caused World War I in 1914? You learn this in world history. It's not part of our standards here in U.S. history. Movement, Standard 15A says describe the movement from U.S. neutrality to engagement in World War I. So here we have a change from the United States being neutral during World War I to be engaged in World War I. In other words, we're going to declare war and involve ourselves in this world war. Okay, so we're going to leave George Washington's neutrality and be in a war that involves the rest of the world. With reference, it says, with reference to unrestricted submarine warfare. In other words, that's going to be the answer to our question: what makes the United States move from neutrality to engagement in the war? Unrestricted submarine warfare is the answer. You need to know this for the EOCT. Alright, so our focus here is on unrestricted